Hello and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. On behalf of OTC Markets, we are very pleased you have joined us for our three-day Metal and Mining Conference. Our next presentation of the day is from Alaska Silver. Please note you may submit questions for the presenter in the box to the left of the slides. You can also view a company's availability for a one-on-one meeting by clicking Book a Meeting in the top toolbar. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Kit Mars, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder, and Pat Donnelly, Executive Vice President of Alaska Silver, which trades on the OTCQX Best Market under the symbol WAMFF and on the TSXV under the symbol WAM. Welcome back, Kit and Pat.
Hey, Greg, thanks for bringing us on your show. Would like to start off with some good news for us and all our investors. So first of all, our name change, Alaska Silver, that was back in April. We wanted to focus on where we are, and the name says it all. We're in Alaska, and our focus is now silver. So very important. We had a couple big events that happened last week. On Friday, we closed our initial public offering in the U.S. On the OTCQX, and we made us go live trading on the OTCQX. I believe Thursday was our first day. So want to welcome our new U.S. investors, and it's great to be here. So I think I'll go ahead and get started, talk a little bit about the company as we move through the slides, and then Pat and I will be sure to leave, try to get as close to 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So I'll go ahead and go through the slides here. On the left, before I change, that is some of our flagship argentiferous galena. It's the gray mineral there. Galena is a lead mineral. Usually it's very cubic in nature. Our galena is totally distorted because it's so full of silver. And all the silver in our deposit usually is contained within that argentiferous galena. Do want to point out our forward-looking statement. So this is something you should take a look at, and especially before investing. And what I'd like to talk about in this slide, as you see here, we're very different from many explorers. We're really a post-discovery company, pre-development. We have two quality assets. Both of these are 43101 compliant resources, and as of having our S1 approved last week by the U.S. Securities Exchange Commission, these are also SK 1300 compliant. So our flagship deposit is the Water Pump Creek deposit. That's the top one there. It is silver, zinc, lead, and contains gallium, which is #1 on the critical mineral list. We have 75 million ounces of silver equivalent that were proven up in just 2 years of drilling. And that's at really an industry-leading grade of 980 grams per ton silver equivalent. And that is all inferred, by the way. We are polymetallic, so that is a silver equivalent. The Illinois Creek District, the namesake is the past-producing Illinois Creek gold mine. That was in production briefly in 1997 and for off and on after that. This was the very first open pit heap leach gold mine in Alaska, fully permitted, fully operational, very important from a development standpoint, that we are not a Greensfields project. This is a brownfield project with the past producing mine. The grade is shown there a little later. I'll turn it over to Pat and he can talk about the grade of that resource, but it's very nice for an open pit mine. So we really have two standalone resources, and these are on either end of an 8-kilometer long corridor of same geologic system, and that's our carbonate replacement deposit that we'll touch about here in a minute. So carbonate replacement deposits have become a little better known here in the last few years. 10 years ago, they were not. But I have an example here, and the goal of this slide is to show the audience the true scale of Water Pump Creek and Illinois Creek. That's shown on the left. That there is a 1-kilometer scale bar in the lower left of our map. The two most famous CRD deposits in the world are shown on the right. On the far right is Sancho Lali in northern Chihuahua, 50 million tons approximately. at a silver equivalent grade, very similar to ours, 809 grams. Santiolali was in production for 300 years and produced almost 1 billion ounces of silver. So that shows what these mines can do. They usually start small, but grow over time. In the center is a little better known, the Tinnick district in north central Utah, just south of Salt Lake City and Bingham Canyon, currently undergoing a renaissance of exploration with Ivanhoe Electric on the left or on the west side, and the Cisco development out of Canada owns the east side. So again, this is an example of a very well-known deposit, produced about 500 million ounces of silver, a grade a little bit higher than ours, and that's about a 20 million ton deposit. Ours is on the left. The takeaway here is Water Pump Creek is at the end of one of the long fingers that you see at Tinnick and Santiolali. We have a lot of room to explore going south on the Water Pump Creek trend. And in the lower left is the Illinois Creek past producing mine. That is principally gold, silver, and copper. And again, a lot of exploration to go in between these two. This is a slide put together by friends at Gentis Capital, Michael Gray, and he's a very well-known mining analyst based in Vancouver, BC. What Michael wanted to do here is take a look at all the silver explorers and pre-development companies, put a filter on them, and what he did was to get on this slide to be one of these 6 companies, you need to have a resource of greater than 60 million ounce of silver equivalent, and very importantly, a cutoff grade of 200 grams per ton or higher. The cutoff grade is very important because it does eliminate some very low grade, large open pit silver deposits that are usually very sensitive to silver prices. Today, those others, lower grade ones, are economic, but a few years ago they were not. So what this shows you is on the left is Water Pump Creek. We have about 75 million ounces. That's the scale on the left. And the little black diamond in the red circle shows our grade, 980 grams per ton, and shows that we're the highest grade of these 6. Some of the other companies that are shown here in deposits are very well known. Second to the right of ours is Vizsla, very large tonnage and silver, contains silver in the deposit. They've been exploring for a number of years. They've took about 390,000 meters of drilling to get to that point. So as a comparison, we're just getting started. We've drilled about under 25,000 meters, and we have a long way to go with more drilling to expand that. Third one is Tonopah, that's Black Rock. Second to the right is very well-known Dolly Varden in the Kitsap Valley deposit. So the numbers on this, take a look at this slide at your leisure. One of the benchmarks to take a look at is the enterprise value per ounce. On this slide, it's a little bit out of date. We were at 77 ounces, 77 cents per contained ounce. That has changed a little bit with silver prices, but this is a good benchmark to use when you're comparing companies. Very importantly, Water Pump Creek contains 2 critical minerals. Number 1 on the list I mentioned is gallium, shown at the top here, and that is wholly contained within our zinc mineral sphalerite. And zinc is also a critical mineral. So we have a very high-grade zinc content, over 11%. And the gallium is contained within that sphalerite. So when you produce a zinc concentrate, the gallium goes along with it. So ultimately, when the processing gets a little further along, and there's only one company in the Western non-Chinese mining smelting world that can extract gallium from zinc, but that is a known process. It is not really an economic driver to the deposit. We look upon our 2 critical minerals as very importantly, they will really help with permitting because of the new emphasis in the United States on critical minerals. So it's a very important aspect of this deposit. Touch briefly here on the capital structure. We try to maintain a fairly tight capital structure. The number on the top there, the public issued shares, that is post-financing that we completed on Friday. And I would like to mention, very proud, that the sole book runner and lead underwriter for our financing was Cantor Fitzgerald and Company, both in the U.S. and Cantor Fitzgerald in Canada. So very proud to have them helping us raise money. And now we have a very good treasury, and really looking forward to next year. So when you do a calculation for the market cap, I suggest you take the top two numbers, 65.4 million, which are the public issued free trading shares, and 22.5 million would be the original shares of myself, my wife Joan as co-founders, Joe Pekenbrock, who's been a chief exploration officer for a number of years. So those are, think of those as just U.S. shareholders prior to going public in Canada in November of 2021. So importantly, on the right, that puts us, directors and officers own probably an industry-leading 32% of pre-development companies. We have some very important, and we're proud of our institutional investors. Number one would be Crescat Capital, Quentin Henney's group out of Denver. Crescat has about 18%. We were joined a couple of years ago by Sprott US Global Asset Management, some of their accounts in Carlsbad, California. And then also Willem Middelkoop's Commodity Discovery Fund based in Amsterdam has been a long time supporter. We did complete our financing on October 3rd. That is shown on the left under the capital structure table. Raised 13.8 million US at a price of 65 cents a share US, or 90 cents a share if you're looking at the Toronto Venture Exchange. So we do have coverage from Michael Gray, I mentioned him before, and Mike Niehauser with Roth Capital. Our leadership team, touched on briefly, Pat Donnelly is here with us. Very importantly, Peter McGaugh, founder of Mag Silver, which was just taken over about 10 days ago by Pan American, and his discovery at Juanicipio in Mexico is now I believe the largest silver mine in Mexico. And also I'd like to point out Joe Pekenbrock is our chief exploration officer. He spent about 10 years with Nova Gold, which is now in the news with their Donlin project, 38 million ounces in Alaska. And that, I believe, will probably be the next mine that goes into production in Alaska. So mentioning Alaska, wanted to put this slide up. It gives you a geographical basis of where we're located in west central Alaska. We're very close to the Yukon River. The Yukon River in this part of the state is known as the Marine Highway, and that's very important for transportation and then also for mining. So really the takeaways from this slide is really to focus on a number of aspects of Alaska. The state has been in the news quite a bit with the current focus on mining and critical minerals by the new administration in Washington, D.C. So Alaska is known as a very safe jurisdiction. 6 major operating mines in Fairbanks area would be Fort Knox, flagship of Kinross Gold. Pogo is an underground mine run by Northern Star out of Perth. It produces 200,000 ounces a year from underground. Far up in northwestern Alaska, the Red Dog, operated by Teck, is the largest zinc mine in the world. And I mentioned Donlin, Nova Gold is due south of us about 100 miles. We have very straightforward permitting in Alaska. We're on state land. We receive 5-year exploration permits for our drilling and exploration. Very clear state mining law. We're all on state of Alaska mining claims. We do not have any federal lands in our claim area. And we also have what's called an uplands mining lease with the state of Alaska that's good for 20 years. And I'll touch on the location to the Marine Highway, I think, in the next slide here. So zooming in a little bit, this shows our properties. We have a number of claim groups, a total of 73,000 acres and growing, and that is about 29,700 hectares. These are all 100% owned properties. Again, the northern half of the district was staked by my wife Joan and I back in 2008, 2010. The remainder to the south, Illinois Creek, was staked by Joe Pekenbrock. And then we personally quitclaimed all our properties into what is now Alaska Silver, its predecessor, Western Alaska Minerals. So what that means is that we did not have to buy any properties. We have no underlying royalties and no other third-party interests. So very important. Do want to point out the thin red line that goes from our Illinois Creek mine west to the Yukon River. That is about a 28-mile route. We've completed 3 years of civil engineering on that. Ultimately, we would like to permit a all-weather access road, and that would allow the Water Pump Creek deposit to export both a zinc concentrate and a lead concentrate. It gives you a little bit of geology. We won't spend a whole lot of time on it, but the carbonate replacement deposits are really very large systems. And so the goal of this slide is to point out on the left is the copper gold center. That's the past producing Illinois Creek mine. The resource there is about 525,000 ounces of gold equivalent. Of that, 373,000 would be indicated and 152,000 inferred. As you move to the right or to the east and northeast, the zoning changes from primarily gold and copper to adding zinc, lead, and silver. And then when you get to Water Pump Creek in the far north end, you see that it is principally silver, lead, and zinc, no gold, no copper. The takeaway from this slide is there's a lot of area in between that has not been drilled, a lot of exploration potential, and that is really going to be the focus going forward since we have completed our financing. I'd like to turn this slide over to Pat Donnelly. He's been working on some economic studies for us. And Pat, why don't you say hello and talk about your ideas here on the Water Pump Creek resource.
Yeah, thanks, Kit. Yeah, I only joined the company last June, and when I was, doing my due diligence, I took a hard look at Water Pump Creek, and what really stands out is the grade. You have almost 1,000 grams per ton silver equivalent, and also has very good metallurgy, and it's pretty clean. And so, I did some back of the envelope calculations. Maybe I should back up a little bit. I used to be a mining analyst. And so, one of my secret skills or I like to refer to is my ability to build cash flow models. And so we do not have any economic studies on this yet, but I did my own back of the envelope. And because the mineralization is relatively wide, it's got clean metallurgy and good metallurgy, this would be a very economic deposit. And, the in situ value per ton is over $1,000. So, it's 2.4 million tons, but it's very, very high grade. And even if you're bearish on silver, this would still make a lot of money. And you wouldn't need a large operation for this to be economic, again, because you got grades. And we referred to some of our peers on the previous slides, and one advantage we have is that this is not a vein deposit. It's a carbonate replacement deposit. They tend to be wide, so you're not having to have numerous working faces. You're not mining narrow veins. This mineralization is pretty wide, so that lends itself to relatively lower cost mining methods. So again, it's a very intriguing deposit. And at some point in the future, we'll probably do an economic study on it.
Okay, well, thank you, Pat. And would like to point out to the listeners, one of the other operating mines in Alaska is Greens Creek. It's currently operated by Hecla. It is the largest silver producer in the U.S. That mine went into production back in the 1980s by Anaconda when I was at that point working for Anaconda. It was put in production by Anaconda and Noranda, two famous mining companies. The size of Greens Creek was only 3 million tons. So just put that into perspective. We'll move along quickly here in the interest of time so we can have some questions. This shows the resource in cross-section, or actually a long section with the drilling. What we'll be looking at this year and really more next year, since we've completed the financing, is to explore what's called Water Pump Creek South, and that is a little bit deeper and a down-thrown block from the current resource. That is going to be one of our three main focuses next year. This is looking down on the project just to give you an idea of the resource. We have two zones that are open for exploration. First priority is Water Pump Creek South, and also Water Pump Creek North target has never been tested. So that's something that we'll be really taking a hard look at next year. So touching on the catalyst before we round up and finish the presentation, mentioned the expansion drilling at Water Pump Creek South, and the goal there is to increase the high-grade silver resource. We're in the process of redefining the geologic model, our drill targeting, and we're utilizing a very, very high-definition study, aeromagnetics, that was finished last year by joint team of the U.S. Geological Survey and Alaska Survey, and that data was just released publicly a few months ago. And Pat, are you going to be working on updating the Illinois Creek resource?
Yeah, I mean, the Illinois Creek resource is pretty interesting. You know, obviously gold, I know we market ourselves as a silver company, but gold just hit $4,000 this morning. And we got, you know, Illinois Creek, which is 500,000 ounces, and that resource was done, I believe, at $1,600 gold. So we'll update that resource. The nice thing about it was, and Kit will dive into it a little bit, is it was the first heap leach gold oxide mine in Alaska, and so they're actually producing doré at site. So we haven't forgotten about the gold, and like I said, we got quite a bit of silver, but also lots of gold, lots of lead, lots of zinc. And obviously we got gallium, so pick your metal, and most importantly, we have the critical metals. So yeah, we'll update that resource at Illinois Creek, and hopefully at some point we'll increase it with some more drilling.
Okay, thanks, Pat. We'll touch on a couple very important things and then wrap this up. So we've been working on the project here since 2010. We're very close to our Alaska Native neighbors. We have 4 villages that are close to us. Galena is the primary one, Nulato and Caltag. We've had a local hire program, been very active since 2017. We are a major private employer in the area. And then very importantly, besides meeting with the tribal leaders in the villages every year, talking to the tribal councils, et cetera, we also give them an opportunity. We fly them out to the camp to actually visit on site and see firsthand what their friends and neighbors are doing, working for us, their job training skills, et cetera. So that's a very important aspect. And in the next slide, which is our last one, we'll wrap up. During one of the visits, I believe a year ago, a group from tribal leaders from Caltag were on site. I gave a little presentation of the past history of the project. And one of the gentlemen said, Kit, by the way, I worked here back when the mine was operating. I was in the gold room. Would you like to see my slide? And this is his slide from 1997-98. When the mine closed due to low gold prices, gold was $273, $74 an ounce, which is a little hard to believe today. But that was too low to sustain production. Went into bankruptcy. The judge said, you need to hold the gold on site until we settle with the creditors. So this is the gold room at that point in time when the mine was closed, about $48 million worth of gold in those days. Today, that is about $500 million worth of gold and silver. So at that point, we'll wrap up our discussion, turn it over to questions. Okay, We'll go ahead and start. Look at one at the bottom here that's why haven't you drilled this year? And so the answer to that is we have. We've been in a quiet period due to our US SEC filings since June. And so we've been really not been able to put a lot of news out since then, but we did start very late in the season in July, completed about number of drill holes. We'll be putting out some announcements in the near future, but we did have a program. And follow up on that, really next year is going to be our major program. We're fully funded, like to go to 3 drills. We own our own equipment. They're on site. 2 of the drills are heavy duty drills that can drill large diameter drill core, which is very critical in exploring these carbonate replacement deposits. And I see another one that is a question on permitting. What is the current permitting status and what are the most significant regulatory hurdles ahead? So I mentioned that it's very important, all of our properties are 100% on state land. So we have state of Alaska mining claims and a mining lease. So our exploration is permitted for another 4 years going ahead. We're in our second 5-year permit. And the past producing Illinois Creek mine, when it was operation, it was a fully permitted, fully operational open pit mine. We have the entire mine data permit set, and that's something that we've gone through and we'll reevaluate here with high gold prices. Going through some of the other questions, why was the financing we just closed in US dollars and not in Canadian dollars? Well, actually it was in both. Because we are now a reporting issuer to the SEC, the primary financing was in the US, and that, as I mentioned, was led by Cantor Fitzgerald. And so the pricing, because it was US financing, was in US dollars. We had a sidecar financing in Canada, and that was actually priced in Canadian dollars. And I see one here, are there plans for non-dilutive government financing or partnerships, especially for the critical minerals? So that's really a great question. We do have a couple grant proposals in with the US government, primarily the Department of Defense, the Defense Production Act. Those are in play, those have been submitted, but until we hear back, it's really hard to say what the outcome will be, but I think that's could be very positive, and so we're looking forward to seeing if those develop further. And Pat, do you see some on the screen that you would like to take a look at? I'm going through my list.
Yeah, someone was asking, I guess it was Maria, is management team open to M&A, JV, or strategic alternatives, and what would be the ideal partner profile? And yeah, you have to be, right? I mean, you know, we're a small company, and you know, I guess the template that I liked is, you know, I was with Trilogy Metals, and they have a joint venture with South 32, and it worked out very well because South 32 contributed capital to the joint venture, but also contributed their mining expertise. And so, yeah, you got to do what's right for the shareholders. You got to do what's right for the company, and especially when you get pretty advanced and you're getting close to a construction decision, then you got to be really open-minded about what you do. But again, you got to be mindful of dilution and losing control.
So we're about to run out of time real quick. I see one from Eric elaborating on how recent exploration results have changed our understanding. So it is an evolving story. I mentioned the AeroMag study flown by the USGS in the state. That has been extremely helpful to interpret structure and stratigraphy, which is not a direct targeting for drilling, but it's very, very important to understand the big picture. And another question from Christian on what work would be needed to advance towards a construction decision. Didn't mention, but we have we have already done 7 years of environmental baseline studies, includes fish habitat studies by the Alaska Fish and Game, wetland studies, archaeology, surface water, quite an array of studies because we've been working on this project for a while. So great baseline environmental. We're looking at what would be needed in addition to that. And you know, we need to finish some of those, but we've already done a lot of that work behind us. Need to do some additional metallurgical work. We'll be putting out some results of our metallurgical work, but if you look at our news release earlier in the year on gallium and critical minerals, it does touch on the high quality of the zinc concentrate this would produce. Pat, is there another one you would like to touch on?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you look at Water Pump Creek, and, you know, the goal would be to double that resource. We'd like to go from 75 million ounces to, you know, 130, 140 million ounces. And the good news is, because it's so high grade, you don't really have to add a lot of material. It's got 2.4 million tons. So we'd like to get that to 4 or 5 million tons of material at that grade. And I think at that point, you can do a PEA. But like I said, you could do a PEA now, but, you know, we could also, you know, we'd also like to grow it first. And, you know, as Kit mentioned, you know, it's an area, it's only seen about 23,000 meters of drilling, and it's a large land package. And so it's been relatively underexplored. And as we mentioned before, these carbonate replacement deposit districts have multiple deposits. And so, and I was up there in August, and what's really interesting is there's no outcrop, there's no exposed rock because it wasn't glaciated. So everything is hidden. So, you know, it's been relatively underexplored. And now that we've done this big financing, now we can really go out there and do a really good exploration program. And I'm pretty excited about the future, and we're gonna have lots of news coming out in the next few weeks. So we're very, very excited, and silver's hot and gold's hot, and Alaska is, you know, a great jurisdiction. I'm, you know, it's one of the best jurisdictions in the world, and the U.S. government's been incredibly supportive. So we're at the right place at the right time, and we got a fantastic team. And Kit and his team with Peter McGaw and Joe Pekenbrock have done just a fabulous job, and that's why I joined the company last June. So here's my 2 cents, and I've been buying stock. So that's why, you know, I like the story so much. I've been buying stock. So there you have it.
Okay. Well, thanks, Pat. And for the last question here, one from Maria that came in right at the end is, how do we look at capital allocation decisions? So going forward, that's going to be a lot easier with the 13.8 million US that we raised last week. In previous years, we've been constrained by capital, so we focused on pretty much drilling. We've been able to do about 4,000 meters sort of on average per year, so a few years more, a couple years less. But that really has been the focus, and less on technical studies. Going forward, we now have the ability to do additional drilling. We'll go from 1 drill rig to 3 next year, hopefully 3. We haven't designed the program yet. We're going to start doing more technical studies, some engineering, hopefully some more metallurgy, and move ahead from that standpoint. Community engagement has always been a focus, and we're going to continue that. It's very important. The last was project infrastructure, and so again, since now we have some very good, strong treasury to build on, we're going to start looking at additional permitting and what we can do to enhance the infrastructure. So at that, I think we can finish it up. We would like to point out the screen behind me shows our camp that's been in place. That was year-round when the Illinois Creek mine was in operation. The airstrip just touched on briefly. That is a 4,400 foot runway, and that is really what we do to when we bring in equipment. And it's very good, and we use bring in C-130 equipment when we aircraft when we try to do that. So with that, I think we'll finish up, and I'd like to thank everybody from joining us, and thank you all, and look forward to having more of the audience as we welcome new U.S. shareholders along with a lot of our Canadian friends. So thank you very much.